You know, I could say this, that over that, I take boot camp in South Carolina and then went to North Carolina and then we went to Camp Pendleton, and I don't know how I was on patrol and we had to go up and down because they said somebody would say that Japanese was over land. So here we go. We didn't get to see any of them, but we had to do what they told us. See
You never did see them.
That's kind of mess it was. I went first. I did joining, and I had a hernia, and I had it fixed, and they wouldn't take me for, I don't know, a year or so it was.
How old were you?
Oh, about 20 something years old. By myself.
All by yourself?
I'll tell you what it was. He was telling me, he sent me a letter that he went to boot camp, and then after advanced training, then he went to Alaska. And that's where I wanted to go. So I went in, and but he sent me a letter, and he was, how they do you? He said, they get you in there, and you better make no work out how much hair you had on your head, but it peeled my head. And we just went to Pearl Harbor, and then that was it.
That was it.
That was it. And you was patrolling that. You know, boys would come over there, and you had to watch over them and see that they didn't get in all of them trouble over there fighting and all that stuff. And then that was it. Then they moved on out, and I was still there.
Were you there during World War II?
Yeah, World War II.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you see any battles at all while you were at Pearl Harbor?
Just patrolling all the time.
Oh, just patrolling.
Patrolling all the time. That's it.
Okay.
You know, I guess you had to do what you had to do. Some of a lot of the other men did the same thing as I did. It was, I guess in our company it was way over 100 men, and that's what we had to do day and night. And you had to watch for, you didn't ever know if any ships are coming in that could come over there, and you had to stay on duty. Sometimes you worked all night long. Yeah, the MP.
MP,
That's all you can say. That's
all
we always. We didn't call it military employee. We call it MP. As I say, this was I carried that 45, and we was over there below Camp Pendleton. I can't think of it was a base there, and it was just 200 of us Marines there, and patrolling there, because the base was big, but we had to patrol it. And I wanted to bring my 45 home, and the captain said that we were going to go down to San Diego and get discharged. And he said, they'll check your bags. If you got any firearms in your sea bag, you're going to get a dishonorable discharge. I said, well, I'll tell you what, that pistol don't mean that much. So I went over and got rid of it. I wouldn't take it with me and put it in a sea bag.
Oh, no way. No.
I had an honorable discharge.
Great.
And I didn't want to get it that dishonorable because you got a piece of steel that. Being respected by the people. You know, they just, right here, I mean, there's some of you just like you, don't you?
Sure.
But you know, most of you people respected the servicemen.
Right.
And the worst was when these boys were drinking. That's when it would be a mess.
Right.
You know, I'm not against a man drinking, but then they go to fighting amongst themselves, and the Navy boys were the worst. They always want to whoop a Marine, and they should have never done it.
Good shape.
I was strong.
Yeah.
I could pick up a 500-pound bale of cotton with my hand.
Whoa.
Now, I guess I was. Well, they had it in the paper. I was in there about a year and a half, but I know it was longer than that. I think it is. You learn discipline.
Over hill, over dale, we will hit the dusty I joined the regular army out of New York, out of Gilbertsville, New York. I started regular army out of high school in 1974, and I got out in '79. Regular army.
Regular army. Okay.
And then when we moved to Texas, I started in New York, went to Korea, and then to Colorado Springs, Fort Bliss, and then to Colorado Springs, to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and then back to Colorado Springs again, and to Germany, and back to Colorado Springs, and got out in
5.5 years. All of us.
Yeah. And then so we were out for a while. I met the wife and we got married, and then we moved to Texas, and then January of '85, I went in Texas National Guard in Taylor, 111th Engineers. And then in May of '86, I went to the 111th Area Support Group at Bee Caves. And I stayed there until December of '07.
Okay.
And then I went to join the unit here in Bastrop with the 342nd Engineers.
Okay.
And I was there from January to about March, and they sent me with a unit 949 big BSB out of Fort Worth to go to Iraq. And so I was there until April '09. Then I came back to the 342nd Engineers, returned me back. I just went with them for deployment, and came back to Bastrop, and I stayed there until August 16th of 2011 when I retired as a Master Sergeant. I was a maintenance mechanic and recovery specialist. But every time I deployed, I went to Hungary in '97, and went to Afghanistan '05 and '06, and then to Iraq in '08 and '09. And while I was deployed the whole time, I was doing logistics. So it doesn't matter what your job is when you deploy, they use you for whatever is needed. Mm-hmm. And all 3 times I was a Master Sergeant. I was Master Sergeant about 18 years. But when in the National Guard and when 11th Area Support Group, and Bee Caves, I went there, I think, 17 times. This is where we did our annual training.
Oh.
Doing logistics. And a Reforger, returning forces to Germany, called Reforger. We used to do exercises over there. And it was a logistics unit, so we did.
Was it all at Ilsheim? Is that what you said?
We did Ilsheim when I was in regular army, but when I went with the 111th Area Support Group, we went in Kaiserslautern and Landstuhl is the actual hospital.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and that's where we did our exercises, was on that same hill at Landstuhl.
Oh.
Every place that you go, you have a city, basically a city. Everybody has to sleep, eat, food, fuel, transportation, maintenance, all that stuff. So somebody has to be there and in charge of it. So that's what I was saying. Like when I was in Iraq, I had 10 jobs, and I worked with contractors, and that's what I did. Fuel, all the dining facilities, made sure that everything was, all the inspections, I did inspections and stuff like that, made sure our contracts were up to standards. That when KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root, hired third country nationalists to do the cooking, that they did it properly. So I would go to the dining facilities and do my little checklist thing and go through unannounced. Same way with bus transportation on post, laundry, all the laundry had to be done. Went to a facility, and all the pickup points and all the laundry that got soldiers would leave or contractors would leave. They leave their laundry behind. Then I was in charge of making sure it got disposed of properly or got back to the right people. Fuel for all the vehicles. Environmental had 17 people that were subcontractors, because every time there was a spill or anything, before we left Iraq, and there was a lot of mess already there before we got there, because Iraqis didn't care. They poured fuels and oils into the septic systems, hazardous waste. So I also worked with the contractors with a wastewater treatment plant.
Would you consider that to be like an extremely difficult job?
Yeah. I mean, it was 24 hours, the whole time we were there for 9 months. In Afghanistan, I was in charge of supply. for the installation, for the whole installation.
Okay.
And in fact, Major General Eikenberry was the general of Afghanistan when I was there in 05 and 06, and he was on our installation. So high demand, you know, along with his staff and a lot of civilians.
And plus you.
Yeah, and we had to report to the general, even though we're National Guard, we were in charge of the whole installation. And the National Guard, of course, is on weekends and doing your annual training and stuff, but I started in January of 85, but then I started working for the Guard as a civil service technician at Camp Swift in 85, in July of 85. And it's a dual status technician, meaning that if you lose your status with being in the military, you lose your civilian contract job. So I had to be in the Guard to have my job. So I also retired on 31st of May of 2011 from the civil service job also. On an Easter of 08, we got shelled. They fired rockets over the wall and stuff, and they hit what would they call a CHU? It's a container housing unit. It's just a container, like a mobile home without any, you know, other good stuff in it. Just maybe a wall and your bed, you know. And there was some guys out on patrol, and they came through and went through their CHU, and they weren't at home. Right through the ceiling and right through their bed, but we were in the bunkers. Working with a senior, you know, I had a lot of ranking people above me that I was working for, and then of course with all the young soldiers too, coming out of basic training and stuff like these. I was in charge of them. In fact, my last tour at the 342nd Engineer, I was the motor sergeant and the first sergeant. And when I was deployed, I've deployed to Iraq with 949 BSB in Fort Worth. I come there as a maintenance guy, and he said, "Well, you're the senior guy, and we don't have a first sergeant, so you're the first sergeant, so you're in charge of everybody." So, you know, just knowing that we got there, did our job, and came back safe, you know, I think that was the best part. Not really the worst, but just being away from home, knowing that when you leave the house, you're going to go someplace for a year, or, you know, however long you're going to be gone, 9 months or whatever. We did a lot of train up before we left, so our tour was a year to go to, you know, with Iraq and going to it. But leaving home and going ready to go to Brownwood and train, and go to Fort Benning, Fort Stewart, and train, and then do your deployment, and then come home. Just being away from home. That's all. Well, there was a lot of stuff happened while I was there, like Pak Chung-hee, the president of South Korea, was out on the big, what they call it, the Blue House, like our White House, doing a presentation on the stage, and a North Korean was there and tried to kill him, and shot his wife. So we were all on alert. And it was right at the end of Vietnam, so they were the last helicopter they pulled Vietnamese out of Vietnam and brought them to Jeju-do Island. And then our job as transportation unit loaded up all of our trucks and went to the South Korea, out to the Jeju-do Island, and brought all those people back. So we're for that. And then there was two when they had a tree that they were cutting back on the DMZ. I don't know if you remember that. 76, I think it was. We had soldiers, and they had soldiers. They agreed to go cut back the limbs on the tree because we couldn't see each other. We were getting grown up. And while they're there, they killed two of our soldiers. They used an axe and killed two of our officers. Mm-hmm. So then again, we were on high alert then, but we never actually, you know, did anything. And I was right outside of Seoul and Kimpel, where the international airport is, just outside there. 31 years and 5 months. Yes. Yeah. And there's a lot of educational benefits, a lot of just like a lot of knowledge they can gain from just learning the common skills for survival. And they have to have college now. They have to go to schools in order to get promoted. They have to do physical fitness and weight control, all the self-disciplinary stuff on their own during their downtime when they're not at drill, but when they come back to drill, it counts. So you have to be self-disciplined not only on the weekend, but you have to be self-disciplined also, you know, on your time off.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was in two different branches. When I graduated high school, I joined the Army there in 1946, and then after I graduated from Texas A&M, I liked the military, and I went into the Air Force. I was what they call a T4, a buck sergeant.
Okay.
3 stripes.
3 stripes.
Of course, we all go through basic training.
Okay, where did you go through basic?
Well, I went through it at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland.
Is that right?
And immediately, of course, at that time, I think it was about 8 weeks of training, very basic, very rudimentary. But then I joined in late September of '46, and around the 1st of December, we sailed out of Seattle, Washington for Japan to be parts of the occupation forces over there. Now the war, the shooting war is over with.
Okay.
It's rather strange. Technically, World War II was going on, but that was a legal definition of the war.
Exactly.
But the shooting was over with. But of course, the devastation in Japan was very evident.
Yes.
Well, not the nuclear bombs, but the conventional bombs. We docked at Yokohama,
Okay.
and we were put into what they call 6x6 trucks, and we drove from Yokohama to almost to Tokyo, where we had some barracks where we stayed in. That there was nothing but damage, all burnt out, rusted, corrugated metal, total devastation. I went in September of '46, and I was discharged then in July of 1948, which was a 2-year assignment actually. Had a couple of jobs, and of course a lot of this make work over there, you know, the guard duty, pull a lot of guard duty over there naturally, and also worked in one of the ordnance depots that they had there in the Yokohama area, supporting our Army trucks, Dodges and General Motors and those sorts. We had parts for all the different types of vehicles. And one of the motivating reasons going into the Army, of course, was besides the draft was still going on when we were, well, it was a partial draft actually, but they had the GI Bill of Rights, and I don't know that I could have gone to college without that opportunity, but when we got in, then we, of course, were eligible for the GI Bill of Rights.
Okay.
And of course, that supported me during the next 4 years when I was at Texas A&M.
That point.
Yeah, I was on a farm. I lived out on our farm.
Okay.
And of course, I was 17, so my parents, my father, had to sign for me to be able to join up.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And he was happy to see you join.
Well, mixed feelings. He knew that I wanted to do that for a couple of reasons. I liked the military and also wanted to get the GI Bill of Rights. So he went along with it, of course. In fact, one fellow from Pflugerville,
Oh, good.
a farm boy from there, he and I were pretty close buddies there during the short time we were at Fort Sam Houston. Well, I majored in economics, and I was in the Corps Cadets at A&M. It was an option at the time for veterans. You didn't have to go into if you were a veteran, but I liked the military, so I opted to go into the Corps Cadets there along with my studies. I got a Bachelor of Science in a BS in economics from Texas A&M. Well, I immediately went in. The Korean War was going on, see, at that time, and there was no option as far as staying out. So I immediately got in and went into pilot training then in the Air Force. I could have probably would have been drafted because of the Korean War deal. It's one of the obligations of the ROTC program. I went through pilot training as soon as I went in, and of course that takes over a year. And then when I graduated, got my wings, like they say, in flying business, then I was given the opportunity to instruct flying, jet flying. So after getting my wings, I went to Arizona, to Williams Air Force Base, where I spent a couple of years, and then an additional couple of years, or a year or so up at Connolly at Waco, instructing students flying, well, basically transitioning from propeller-driven airplanes to jets. And I was fortunate to get a regular commission when I went into the military then in the Air Force. So I had what they call a regular commission, and of course you've had your basic training earlier. Well, initially we trained with initially when I, as a student, started with what they call a T6, and then that's a propeller-driven airplane. And then we transitioned into T-28s, which was also a prop-driven airplane. And then we transitioned into jets like the T-33, which was a single-engine, two-seat airplane with props. Actually, it's a variation of the F-80, but it was made into an instructor's aircraft. And had so an instructor pilot could be in the cockpit in the front or back, depending on what you were doing. But for the jet phase only, the very last portion of before I got my wings, I actually got my wings in Conway in Waco.
Okay.
And then I had I was given the opportunity there if I wanted to instruct, which I accepted because I like to instruct and like flying. So then I went through what they call IP. Instructor pilot school, IPS, and went to Williams, which is near Phoenix, Arizona, at Chandler, Arizona, where I instructed students in for, I guess, 2.5 years or so.
How long?
Air Force?
In the Air Force?
No, I was there for, total service. I was in the Air Force for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 25 years. Then, of course, I had some Army time and a little Army Reserve time while I was at A&M. The Strategic Air Command, we call it SAC. It was commonly called SAC at that time, which had the nuclear responsibility. They opened up a program. They had their newest bomber at that time was the B-47. It's a 6-engine jet bomber. And they were, if you had 1,500 or more hours of single engine time, which I had, you could go into SAC then and become what they call an aircraft commander. The B-47 is a 3-person crew, a pilot, a co-pilot, and a navigator bombardier. And you could go in as the first pilot, or as we call them, AC, aircraft commanders.
Oh, okay.
Which was a big opportunity at that time, a little bit unusual, but it was a good opportunity. I took advantage of it. Well, then I went through Craig Air Force Base, where they have IPS, Instructor Pilot School, and after going through that, then I did go to Williams, where I worked with students, and then I spent time there, and there was a gunnery program they were setting up at Williams, and so we went down through. I went down to Del Rio at Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas. Went through gunnery school. But it so happened that at that time I was single. That's before I met Margie. And so they made a great decision. Of course, they often do that. There were about 9 of us that were down going through the program. The commanding general came down and he said, "This is no place for a married guy," talking about Del Rio, Texas. There were 2 of us that were still single. So guess what? I wound up staying in Del Rio, worked with students, instructing students there. I went from Del Rio to SAC in the B-47 program.
Okay.
And of course, SAC at that time had the nuclear responsibility, and SAC had B-47s, which was at that time the primary bomber, and they were just getting B-52s, which is the larger 8-engine bomber, and they were scattered all over the world. With the headquarters, of course, SAC is up at Omaha, or was at Omaha at that time. Yes, I did. I wound up, I was in SAC. We were basically stateside for quite a while, and then I attended the National War College in Washington. And then I went from there, after graduation, and that's a 1-year course, I went to Vietnam for a year. And that's when the war was going on. and I was with the 7th Air Force there in Vietnam.
So you were actually flying planes over Vietnam?
Well, a little bit. I was basically at the headquarters there.
Oh, okay.
I was at that time. Yeah.
Oh, so commander means?
Well, no, I was a staff officer on the what's 7th Air Force headquarters, which 7th Air Force, of course, was very large at that time because the war was ongoing, and
Right.
we had a 4-star general there at our air base that was commanding general.
Who was that?
General George Brown.
Okay.
General George Brown, very good guy.
Excellent. Excellent.
Then I was assigned to the SAC headquarters, Streets Air Command headquarters there at Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, okay.
And we spent 3 years there. And I was on the operations staff up there. And then I went to, from there, I went up to Abilene to Dyess, Air Force Base at Abilene, and they had a B-52 wing there. A B-52 wing has 15 bombers, and then we've got tankers also, KC-135s at that time.
Oh.
And we had a wing there, and I had the good opportunity to be the commander of that unit during the time I was there at Dyess. And then we, at that time, we would go TDY at the time. I was the ops officer when I got there, but then I became the wing commander later on. But as an ops officer, I spent 6 additional months in the Vietnam War, but I was stationed at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam.
Okay.
And we were, at that time, our bombers we were actively bombing South Vietnam.
Okay.
I was in Guam, TDY. In fact, all of those assignments, the most you could go TDY technically without what they call a PC as a permanent change of station was, I think, 179 days, theoretically short of 6 months. And so that was we'd go to Guam for 179 days. I was the ops officer of the bomb wing over there, 72nd Bomb Wing Provincial. Yeah, we'd fly routine mission every day, night and day, take off. They had to refuel, obviously, so the bombers would take off from Guam, and they were coordinated with tankers that would take off from Okinawa, and the tankers would come down, and we'd pick up fuel. Our bombers would pick
In
up
the
fuel.
air?
Oh yeah, air refueling.
Wow.
Mid-air, what they call mid-air refueling.
That's pretty interesting.
It is interesting.
So you've done that a number of times in your life?
Yeah. On occasion, we pick up even over 100,000 pounds of fuel on at one time, one gulp.
When did you meet Marge at this point? Was it in Abilene or was it in?
No, I met her when I was at Tucson in B-47.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that she was, just became a senior at the University of Arizona, and one of my roommates, I had the good fortune, he introduced me to her, and we were married then, I guess 6, 8 months later after we had met. We got married in 1958, and the Vietnam experience was after that.
Right.
Well, the most intense portion was when we were at Guam, that for about an extended week, President Nixon had decided he wanted to end the war over there. So they started using B-52 bombing up north, there in the Hanoi, Haiphong area, which was, of course, a pretty highly defended area. And we had a very intense campaign then for, 10 days, which I think it was very instrumental in ending the war.
Okay.
Yeah, it really was.
They didn't have, the battle didn't have a specific name or anything?
They called it linebacker.
Oh.
Actually, that's football terminology, but Operation Linebackers, I think what we use. I don't, it's kind of so far back now, but.
What year was that again?
It was in December of 1972.
Wow.
Well, I liked, I guess there are two. I guess from a just fun point of view, I really enjoyed instructing flying. That was fun, very satisfying, because you'd get students that didn't know how to fly, and then 3, 4, 5 months later, guess what? They'd get their wings and they would fly. That was a lot of fun. And I guess the most satisfying position, which is being a wing commander at Dyess Air Force Base at Abilene, because if you're the commander, you have a chance to do things, even though of course you have to follow all the regulations and so forth, but it gives you a lot of liberty and you can work with the troops and so forth, which I really enjoyed. So I had the opportunity then of getting an assignment in Oslo, Norway, which was my last assignment in the military, but as a family we left Abilene, then went to Oslo for 2 years. And of course our 4 children were still in the school system, and they attended the Oslo Department of Defense school system.
How neat.
And it really was in a way one of the most enjoyable, because Norway is a beautiful country and the family had a great time. But from a military point of view, it's sort of a blah assignment. It wasn't that
exciting.
You know, that exciting after having flown airplanes and done things like that. I never did have a period in which I said, I really want to get out of this.
Is that right?
Really did not. That even being an enlisted guy at 17 and 18, that the sergeants were tough on us. And, I mean, they raised Cain with us. And we were coward at times, but then you took then your escape was your friends, your comrades. And I think so. I'm not totally certain that I would. So much depends on the individual, because it's such a big decision. And if they have that inclination, that desire, yes. But it's not easy. You know, you have to like to it, and personalities are so different. So I'd be very careful about who I would encourage and who I wouldn't.
I was drafted in 1954.
1954. And what branch were you in?
I was in the Army. Homer Johnson went in the same day I did.
Is that right? Army too?
Yeah. At Fort Bliss.
Fort Bliss. And that is that
in El Paso.
in El Paso? Okay.
I was reassigned there for another six months training and leadership.
Okay.
And then after that, I was sent to Fort Lewis, Washington. Army anti-aircraft.
Anti-aircraft. Wow.
This was
Strategic.
I was sent there and then reassigned at Fort Lewis, Washington, down to, and I don't remember the name of the little camp right at Los Angeles, right on the banks of the
Pacific. The Pacific.
Pacific Ocean. Wow.
I could throw a rock into the ocean. Then I was sent from there to Riverside, California, March Air Force Base, and that's where I run a radar set there at March Air Force Base for the Army. Well, there was a boy. I think the reason we were sent there were five or six of us was sent up there from Fort Bliss up there to Fort Lewis, Washington. And we thought we were going to be sent overseas. You know, they were still sending people over to Korea. And one of them rejoined up for another 4 years of Army. And he got to pick where he wanted to be sent. And he picked down at Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
And so he got to go home for 30 days. And meanwhile we got shipped out ship down there where he went. And I never forget, we welcomed him when he came down there. And he was sick when we got out, and he still had his 3.5 years to go. 2 years.
2 years. Okay, you spent
Served
2
2
years.
years.
Uh-huh.
One thing that I vowed, I wouldn't volunteer for anything, but I'd do whatever they asked me.
Mhm.
Whatever they'd ask me to do, I'd do it.
Yes.
But I wouldn't volunteer for anything.
Whole
Stayed
time.
the whole time.
Okay. But you ran the radar screens.
Ran a Tipsy One, it was called Tipsy One Dog Radar.
Mm-hmm. And what did you look for on the radar?
Airplanes.
Just any kind of aircraft at
Yeah.
all? Could you tell the difference between a American or you just
You could just tell there was an object
an
out
object? Uh-huh.
there. Learn more about what life was about.
Mm-hmm.
I maintain that I learned as much in then 2 years in the military as I would have if I'd went to college for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up to be a man,
Little
just a
small
country
town.
kid.
Mm-hmm. So had you ever been out of Elgin before you went into the Army?
I was up in Fort Worth for a year.
Oh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Poisoning?
I got food poisoning in there.
Really?
Yeah, shit, I got it bad. We were out on military training in what they call a bivouac, and I was late going for dinner that day. I was a section leader, so I let my men go first and eat and come back, and then I went and ate. Meanwhile, I get them meatballs, I guess, spoiled. It was a long time before I could ever eat another meatball.
He still doesn't like meatballs.
Live in a tent.
That's not much.
Some of the worst times was we went out. That was when we was here in Fort Bliss. Went out to New Mexico, and it snowed. It was so cold it snowed. We had to live in a tent. And then for dinner they served us ice cream. I'll never forget that. And the container froze to your hand.
Oh, often
Sergeant.
Sergeant. Okay.
I got to be a sergeant before that. Yes,
Yes. And for what reason?
make a man out of him. You don't have mom and daddy there. You by yourself.
Mm-hmm.